In the previous videos, we discussed the HTTP request response cycle on the client side. In this video of the playlist, we will implement the HTTP request response cycle on the server. Node.js is a popular runtime to execute JavaScript code on the server side. First, we will implement a simple CRUD application purely in Node.js. Then, we will re-implement this application with Express.js, which is a popular web application framework. So first, a pure Node.js implementation, then the same CRUD application with the popular web application framework Express.js. If you want to follow along, the source code is available on GitHub. You find a link to the GitHub repo in the description below this video. Before we jump into the source code, here is an overview of the server-side request response cycle. The first step is to access the attributes of the HTTP request. For the sake of this example, let us assume that we have received the following HTTP request from the client. The method is patch. We would like to patch the car with the ID number 2. And we would like to set its year attribute to 2023. To implement it in JavaScript, we want to access the following attributes of the HTTP request. Method, which is patch in this case. The resource, which is cars. The ID of the car being patched, which is number 2. And then this piece of information, year 2023. We would like to access it as the request body and as a JavaScript object. So that's what we want. Now let's see what we get from the server. Whenever we receive an HTTP request, Node.js calls our code with a request object. This object has the following attributes: method, which will give us patch in this example. So far, so good. Unfortunately, we won't get the resource and the ID as two separate attributes. We will get them as a single string /cars/2 in the URL attribute. It is our responsibility to split this string into pieces and to identify cars as the resource and the number 2 as the ID of this car. So it is our job to do it. Perhaps surprisingly, there is no body attribute. This request object doesn't have a body attribute, and for good reasons. If we want to load the message body, so if we need this piece of information of the request as a JavaScript object, we have to load it explicitly. Node.js offers a function JSON, and if we call this async function with the request object, it gives us the message body as a JavaScript object. Now let's see how we can send the response back to the client. This is our next example. Let us assume that we have finished processing the following HTTP request. It was a POST request from the client creating a new car on the server. We are done processing this request, and we would like to send the following response back to the client. HTTP 201 created, and then the location of the newly created car, the location header with the value /cars/2. Let's see how to send this response in Node.js. Whenever Node.js calls our code with the request object, it also gives us a response object. We write our response to this object. So in this example, we would set the status code attribute to 201, which means created. And then we would like to write out the location header. We do so by calling the setHeader method of the response object with the location as key and /cars/2 as value. It is important that we actually send this response back to the client by calling the end method of the response. Now, what if the response has data? Or in other words, the response also has a message body. In this example, we assume that we have finished processing this GET request, which asks for the car with the ID number 2. And in our response, we would like to send this piece of information back, the requested data, the car with the ID number 2. Here is how to implement it in Node.js. We set the status code to 200. Although the default value of status code is 200 anyway, and we could delete this line and it would work just as well. Then we must set the content type to application.json. We do it by calling the setHeader method of the response object with content type as key and application.json as value. Then we write out the requested data. The data is a JavaScript object in our code, and it is our responsibility to convert this JavaScript object to string by calling JSON-stringify. And just as before, we send the response back to the client by calling the end method of the response object. So that was the overview of the request-response cycle in Node.js. In the next video, we will look at the actual source code. Did this video help? Then please give it a thumbs up. Please like it. If you have any questions or problems, please leave a comment right below, and I will do my best to get back to you. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.